So imagine a future where construction is faster, smarter, and more sustainable. A future where buildings are assembled like pieces of a puzzle, creating not just efficiency, but adaptability as well. This is the promise of the kit of parts, a revolutionary approach in the construction world. My name, Indhira Figuereo Blaney. I am the US leader for the aviation market here for WSP. And in this episode, I am delighted to be joined by Matt Randall, Pre-Construction Director for Mace UK, Priya Jain, President for the Americas at Mace Consult, and Dale Sinclair, WSP UK Head of Digital Innovation. Today, we'll explore the growing complexity of construction, from sustainability challenges and labor shortages to the technological innovations pushing the industry forward. We'll ask, why have some aspects of construction remained unchanged for so long? And more importantly, what new approaches through industrialized construction are changing the game? So with me, Priya, Matt, and Dale, welcome to the WSPN podcast. So let's start right off, right? So how do you think this whole industrialized construction discussion has changed or is more complex to deal with the design and delivery of projects today? And I'll just say, any of you, if you want to just jump in and start that conversation.
So I'll start, if that's okay, Indira. This is not a new concept, by the way. This way of working is modern methods of construction or industrialized construction, but it needs to stay in the forefront of the conversation. We need to encourage that all sectors take up a way of working that then builds on the best practice and the case studies where we are able to get improvements in efficiency and improvements on building projects to time and cost. This method enables us to really achieve benefits in all of those areas.
Yes, and just building on what Matt has said, the design process has definitely become more complex, Indira, as we look to take the embodied and operational carbon out of our projects. We're having to integrate new systems into our buildings to do so. And of course, that creates many new interfaces and interdependencies. And of course, lots of learning points that we've got to take on board. But I think what's fantastic with the Industrialized Construction Initiative is that in the short term, it becomes difficult because we've got to shift from taking thousands of small elements to site to a small number of large components. And of course, that comes with lots of new learning points. But certainly, as we come through the other side of this learning point, we do think that things will become simpler again. So Matt and I, when we do our next project, will be able to do that much easier because we will already have our catalogue of components and all the pain of the first projects will have been, obviously superseded by the feedback and content that we have to move forward.
Just coming in on that one, I think at the end of it, right, to tie it all together, it's also about leadership. It's really going to be about how do we end up defining who that quote unquote supply chain is, how do we integrate them all together, bring communities together, and looking beyond pure value, right? A lot of times when we are delivering these programs, it has to be knitted together and there has to be a golden thread around it. So it's the client, the delivery partner, your JV partners, your supply chain, and all of that to be brought together, including putting into account what the distractions and the disruptions could be and teaching people and upskilling them to be able to go ahead and play in this arena.
As you're saying leadership, it makes me think about how siloed we are, right, traditionally. And this is really bringing all that community of designers, manufacturers, construction industry, the whole thing, more synergies together, right? So contributing with each other a lot more than what we would see otherwise. But you were going to say a little bit more there.
Yeah, I think part of it is also, I think it's about that skin in the game, right? I mean, why does it matter and what's the end goal? And then being able to demonstrate what the positives that come out of it. So the designers, the constructors, the community, the client, the stakeholders, just putting it together and moving towards a common vision. So I would say it's about moving from, as we are looking at the life cycle of the project, starting from design all the way up to operation. How do you bring the entire supply chain together? And how do we end up delivering programs that are quote unquote changing the culture of delivery, where we are working collaboratively and rather than just saying, hey, I'm the designer, I'm the constructor, I'm the operator, and I'm the client. So I know one of the things that we have been working with WSP on is around this whole collaborative delivery model. And could we use that as a way to go change the industry and change the construction. So to me, that would be one of the elements to look at.
So with that, it's a great segue for my next question. What are the things that we think have changed with this new way of thinking on that industrialized construction side? And what do we feel that hasn't changed, as we talk about the whole construction market in general, as it relates to this industrialized topic? I'll start with you, Dale.
Yes, I mean, it's a really good point, Indira. I mean, when you drive into change into a very traditional industry, because what we've got to remember is construction has been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's seeped into our whole culture. So everything from the large conglomerates that provide products through to supply chain members have been doing things for a long time. And I think that's one of the things that we've been finding difficult to change. So we can change the behaviors of the team that are designing the kit of part projects that Matt and I are working on, but it's really hard to change everything at the same time. So we're playing into traditional procurement processes. We're also playing into the fact that we issue hundreds of drawings. So we do these amazing 3D data-rich models, but we still are predicated on pushing lots of paper around, even if that is digital paper.
Right. Matt, do you want to add more on that?
Yeah, I think if we're truly to transform the way we build and deliver better benefits for clients and also communities, we have been looking over the last 20 years to achieve these goals through a production approach. And by taking 80% of the work off-site means that people can actually build 80% of our construction projects in a factory, which means simple things. They can park outside their work environment. They can go home and pick their kids up at 3:30 at school. Rather than be working hundreds of meters at the top of a building, they can be doing this in the comfort of a factory environment. The outcome is standardized components, controlled factory environments, optimized quality of the components, better efficiency of assembly. So all of these benefits come through the entire process that are enabled by this way of working, this digital platform that we create, and then we can create the physical components that are then delivered to site in a much more efficient manner.
You hit upon an interesting point, Dale, which was around multiple drawings. How do you go about streamlining? And I know this conversation going on about data and AI. And from that also comes great responsibility, right? It's also about how do you go ahead and put the right governance in place. Second of all, if I look at some of our clients, sometimes our clients are ahead of us, but sometimes we are ahead of them. And then how do you bring them along on the journey so that way we can go ahead and make sure that the outcome is not getting lost? So that is going to be another element in terms of making sure that we are all moving in the same beat and the same pace. And I think the other thing is sometimes, and again, I'm an engineer, so sometimes we want to make it perfect. And I think we also have to get into the habit of failing fast and failing forward, right? So let's go try something, do a MVP, and then demonstrate success from it. And Matt, you pointed out something about building it offsite. Now, I'm going to bring in a US lens over here a little bit, where a lot of our public sector jobs are to demonstrate that how are we adding on to the economy, right? It's public taxpayer money. So if in this particular case, we as industry have to hit this on the head where, hey, yes, we are going to go build it offsite. By the way, that doesn't mean that jobs are being taken away. It's more around how do you become more efficient and how do you are effective, maybe not even the word efficient, how do you become more effective and be able to get projects on time, accelerate the building, and then also make sure that we don't run over budget. So just an element of bringing in that human element in and being able to tell that story.
Matt, you were going to add a bit more there?
Yeah, just following on from Priya there. I think generally we need to, in the construction industry, have a better treatment of our supply chain. And this gives the opportunity, which is the aim of reducing insolvencies, boosting the strength of our sector. Without the varied and flourishing supply chain, the whole ecosystem risks collapse. So I think the type of suppliers that we use to build these offsite components are potentially different from the traditional on-site construction. So we have more manufacturing-based suppliers, and then we have smaller, more multi-purpose teams who are good at the assembly part when the sub-assemblies eventually come to the site.
You guys are giving me a great segue as we talk here in terms of, my next questions, because I'm thinking So what do you see as the future of that delivery of construction? And we are talking through it already, right? So, but what are other things that, we can talk about in terms of, the manufacturing processes you're talking about, Matt, as well as if you want to share a little bit of a proof of concept here on the Manchester airport as well.
Manchester Airport has been fascinating. The interesting thing about airports, particularly in the UK, is that they've done all their expansion at the perimeter of the airport by now. And the only way to expand is to go deeper inside of the airport. And the only way that we can then construct is by creating enclave sites. So by taking a kit of parts or industrialized engineering approach, we've rationalized where Dale was saying you have to take 5,000 individual components to build this part of the building, which we call the node and the fixed link bridge. We've distilled that down to 67 elements, and those sub-assembly elements can then be taken onto a live airport. And with airport working, you've got challenges around security, safety, potentially impeding into airspace. So you need to be able to work within these areas. And adopting the kit of parts approach at Manchester means that we've just reduced the number of components from 5,000 to about 67, and that then compressed the on-time delivery programs, which then reduces the impact on the airport operation.
That's right. Dale, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the learning points we're finding is obviously we're used to issuing information for construction. So we issue hundreds of drawings so that the kind of all these small components can be put together on site. But when we're issuing a small number of large things, then really those instructions are different. And obviously that's one of the things that we've been doing with Matt's team is learning, the sequencing becomes more important, and we really need to understand how those elements come together. I mean, two observations. I was on site a few weeks ago, and it was amazing watching the complexity of all the construction workers in the different modes, obviously to put these big components together. So I still think there's a lot for us to learn around the complexity of how things go together. But back to your point, Matt, it was absolutely fascinating. I saw these kind of arrays of generators, and there was all the temporary paths, and it seemed to me that we're trying to turn, quite rightly, our construction sites almost into factories. And then that's where you saw yet another benefit of moving things off site, where you've got stable lighting, better working environments, all inherently in the factory, not being moved around all the time. And I think it's just another reason why we're not driving the productivity bar down on construction, because we're having to address these other points on site, like safety, which becomes more important. So we probably are actually making productivity improvements in construction, but then those are negated by us having to respond to other things like safety or carbon on site itself, managing waste and so on. So I think it's really exciting times, but certainly the more I see the efficiencies of doing things in the factory. And back to your point, Priya, we've been doing some work with some clients recently, and we realize, wow, if you move 500,000 construction workers from, say, central London, you can put them anywhere in the country. And then you can put those workers into areas of deprivation or unemployment and really drive social value propositions. So I think the future of shifting construction from site to the factory is a really, really exciting one. Plus, of course, robotics and such like are really, really hard to get to work on a site environment. And as soon as we get things into factory and we get standardization and all these other elements to come to bear, then we can really start to power up the power of making things in the factory.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And that's a really good point on safety, because as I'm thinking about some of our urban environments, right, a lot of our work is getting done in brownfield areas. So this can actually help with also controlling disruption. And how many of us have been in airports where we all travel, where this whole passenger experience, and you have construction going on and you're trying to manage logistics, constrained spaces. So this could be another added value to being able to go say, hey, do it offsite and then bring it up online, because it allows us to deal with logistics, safety. And you made a really good point, Dale, about, I kind of call it lift and shift. So you're training these people, and then you can say, hey, here's another program, and you can still be where you are, and it can be picked up and lifted somewhere else. So some really good points around that. And the biggest one is for me is also around this minimizing disruption and constrained spaces. So you really could end up improving passenger experience.
I'm glad you all mentioned in this whole disruption and efficiencies on the labor usage and whatnot. I mean, I do want to share a little bit of what we're doing in terms of this industrialized idea as well, which we have very much constrained spaces here in the US as everybody else does, right? And I want to cite a little bit of what we were doing on Atlanta Airport, where we did take this modality of, the pieces off the site, but not off site of the airport. They were still on airport because we had enough land to do that, which is very weird here in the US. But that whole idea of taking that piece out, being able to do these big segments of the concourse for concourse whitening, de-whitening, and getting everybody offside, doing all of it together. I mean, the productivity is amazing, right? So we save so much more time. We are so much more coordinated because everybody is on at the same time doing what they need to do. And then just seeing how they had to place this back to where it needed to go with a joystick and a guy just walking behind the big trailer, just moving the joystick is just amazing to see how our industry is really going into the future and really delivering wonderful construction today that maybe back in the days we would have not. I mean, if I tell my father that you will drive this long, very, very long trailer with a joystick, he will say to me, "Are you kidding me?" So, so that is just amazing to see today. And then when you take it off, even to, as you're saying, more manufacturing, it's just wonderful to see how our construction industry is really moving forward to the future and to deliver. Priya?
What you raised a very good point, Indira, right? I mean, let's be honest, we are considered a pretty stodgy industry, right? We are considered like we plod along, and one of our challenges is talent attraction. So imagine being able to put in some of these elements and attracting the next talent, because that's what they want, right? If I look at the next generation or people who we are training, they want that glamour of, hey, we can do this technology wise and here's how it can be done. So I think this could be another element to be able to bring the next generation in. So if we can do the knowledge share, use technology, and then attract the talent.
They're better than us with the joystick, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
I think it's also surprising. Yes, having that digital model working with that means you can really drill into it right down to fixing level. So you can really understand, and we have had challenges on site, there's no doubt about it, where one part doesn't fix to another, and then we have to understand tolerances. The other thing that has really been fascinating is that on a traditional project, it's left to the contractor to work out the sequencing and how he puts the building up. With WSP, we've actually designed the lifting points, the sequencing, the logistics of how this goes together, so that the stair core goes up first, and that has the capability to resist the wind loading in the temporary case. So it has to go up in a certain sequence, and by doing that, forcing everybody to work in that sequence means that you then get an efficiency in planning because everything has been delivered in a consistent way. The other thing is that this is it's a bespoke airport at Manchester, which is a solution there, but there's no reason why this couldn't be transferred to other buildings where people need to change levels with lifts and staircases, and then you can start to see an increased height and an increased size of these things.
Indeed. And actually, that takes me to my next question here. I mean, we talked a little bit about how the technology is enabling to do a lot of this, right? But let's take it a little bit more. How do we make sure that even though we're doing this offsite and we're doing this wonderful big pieces of construction and just setting it in place, how do we make sure that throughout all of this, we keep that infrastructure resilient, right? And the process is still the process, but what is our approach here on the resiliency of the infrastructure that we're building?
Yeah, I think, Indira, the real important thing is that when we create a kit of parts, and of course there is a question, well, what is a kit of parts? And for us, a kit of parts is not just catalogue of large construction components. It's a whole new philosophy in some senses of how to make buildings. And what's great about making large parts is we can play to the whole circular economy processes, because if we really think through how we're going to put a building together, it becomes easier to deconstruct that building or disassemble that building in the future. So That's how we see this kit of parts moving. And of course, as Matt said, that what's really exciting is once we bank all these large components, we can then roll these out instantly on the next project. We can take all these learning points. And Matt's point is really valid. We're now finding on the next generation of kit of part projects that we're doing that right at the concept stage, we're sitting in the room with craneage experts and we're databasing the weight of elements. We're even doing kind of load plans so that we can optimize the carbon of transportation through the development of the concept design. So we're seeing lots of elements happening, and I think that's what's really exciting, and that's where, in a sense, the term kit of parts almost becomes a proxy for doing things really differently. And I think for me, the final point around that is, and I don't think we've mentioned this yet, is the term designing for manufacturing and assembly. And I think I would say in the last 12 months, what's become incredibly clear to me is that designing for manufacturing and assembly is a completely different process to designing for construction. And a lot of our design and contracting colleagues think, well, we've been doing this for years. We've been making things in the factories for years. But when you look at the kit of parts approach, it's a really different approach because you're actually starting a project thinking with the mindset of a manufacturer. It's a very, very different process. And that's what's been really exciting with working with Mace on this project, that we're getting those learning points. And now we're able to take those all on to the next generation of projects as we begin to really grasp the future of construction and doing things very, very differently.
Just adding to that, Dale, I mean, you talk about the resilience of infrastructure, the literal impacts of infrastructure. So not only does it provide job creation and associated community initiatives, apprenticeships, it also creates value of the local area and value for the sector by creating a stronger labour market where you're building and leaving a lasting legacy. And this is often a measure of a success of a program, but it also means that if you can then have local job creation and upskilling and increasing people's fluency in using models and digital engineering and carbon fluency, it starts to then change people's thinking as to how these products can be built. And I think upskilling people in this way of working means that you're then going to get that resilience and inertia on future projects.
Yeah, I know you've talked about the supply chain and manufacturer. I think this is also an opportunity for us as industry to help our clients better understand the art of possible, right? And I know we have had some discussions around language, what gets used where, how do you make it relevant? And as we are thinking about these innovations and different things, how do we end up using clear, consistent language? And how do we also end up seeing what values are added? And Matt, you alluded to, you mentioned a few of them around, and I think Dale, you did that too, around health and safety, well-being, also around sustainability, right? So yes, technical work is there. This is about innovation, but at the end of the day, the outcomes that really resonate with the client, with our supply chain, and with our communities. So it's all about using clear, consistent language.
Yeah, we've been calling it a lot of things, but we all mean the same, right? So, well, thank you very much, Priya, Matt, and Dale, for sharing your valuable insights with our audience today. To our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in for sure. If this talk has sparked your interest, please leave a comment. So thank you, and we'll talk more next time.